The introduction. In the heart of the Pacific Northwest lies the sleepy town of Alderwood, a place that at first glance seems untouched by time. Dense forests blanket the fringes, their towering pines whispering secrets carried by the cool, damp wind. The streets are lined with quaint, historic homes, each narrating their own story. The old wooden facades, weathered and worn, yet steeped in a warmth that invites passers-by. To most residents, Alderwood is a sanctuary, a haven where one could easily escape the chaos of modern life. Yet beneath the tranquil facade brews an unsettling tension. The air is thick and heavy, almost as if the town itself braces for something unnameable. For those who call Alderwood home, the year has already come with its share of sorrow. A spate of peculiar disappearances, each notable for the absence of any definite clues or leads, has begun to plague the community. The first vanishing, a young woman named Emily Carterson, ripples of fear through the picturesque landscape, though the deepest tremors would soon follow. As dusk fell each evening, the large, creeping shadows cast by the surrounding trees felt darker. Crickets chirped in the underbrush, adding to the fragile ambience of a restless night. Residents now locked their doors just a bit tighter, glancing anxiously over their shoulders as they passed unlit alleys or weathered fences. Alderwood was no longer the idyllic refuge it had once been. The stillness of the town told stories of things left unsaid, and soon it would become evident that secrets nestled within its cozy corners were about to be unearthed, and the truth often bore a chilling nature. The victim. Emily Carter was an unlikely candidate for tragedy. At 25, she was the embodiment of optimism, known for her infectious laughter and generosity. A budding artist, she devoted her days to teaching pottery at the local community center and spent her evenings sketching the vibrant landscapes of Alderwood. Her friends often marveled at her ability to capture the beauty of the familiar, infusing life into canvases of the very town they knew too well. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Emily decided to take a walk through the forest trails that bordered her neighborhood. The trees were adorned in shades of gold and crimson, and the earthy scent of fallen leaves filled the air. As she ventured deeper into the woods, each step carried an unusual weight. That day, she left her usual trail to explore a lesser-known path, one whispered about in town but rarely traversed. It curled deeper into the thicket, shrouded in mystery and enveloped in an eerie stillness. Hours passed, and when Emily failed to return home, her concerned mother dialed her friends. Each call met with unanswered questions. The sun dipped below the horizon, transforming the sky into a canvas of deep blues and purples, and panic began to nestle into the hearts of those who knew and loved her. By nightfall, her absence warranted a search party, local law enforcement, and even volunteers from neighboring towns. As the search unfolded, Alderwood began to unfurl its anxiety. The fearful silence, often punctured by distant crickets, now felt charged with a haunted timbre. Each passing hour diminished the hope of finding Emily safe, and soon it became painfully clear. Alderwood's tranquility had cracked, and something sinister now lurked within its shadow. The crime scene. It was just after dawn when the search party made a harrowing discovery. The scent of damp earth clung to the cold morning air as volunteers retraced Emily's last known steps, navigating the treacherous underbrush with heavy hearts and lingering hope. When they arrived at a small clearing known as the crime, scene, they encountered the remnants of destruction, cloaked in a haunting stillness. The light filtered through the trees, casting ethereal beams that illuminated the ground, where a patch of disturbed leaves and freshly cracked soil suggested something had occurred here. Something foreboding. Nearby, the twisted roots of an ancient tree hugged the earth, as if trying to wrestle the ground back to safety, while the trees surrounding the clearing stood sentinels, silent witnesses to the haunting tension that hung heavily in the air. A flicker of color caught one of the searchers' eyes, a piece of Emily's turquoise sweater, torn and tangled in a thorny bush. Heartbeats quickened, resonating in the charged silence. The sight cloaked the clearing in an unbearable gravity, like an anchor dragging their spirits down into the abyss of despair. What had begun as a straightforward search for a missing girl had devolved into something far darker. As law enforcement arrived, the reality of what had transpired settled uncomfortably over the group. The area was quickly cordoned off, a fragile perimeter established around the unfolding horror. Evidence markers began to sprout from the ground like bleached flowers, while officers scrutinized their surroundings with a growing sense of dread. What had they stumbled upon? As darkness lingered in the corners of Alderwood, the collective consciousness of the town twisted into a knot of anguish, a palpable fear of the unknown swelling within their small community. The early investigation, in the chaos following the discovery of Emily's belongings, Alderwood police launched an investigation that would shake the community to its very core. The small town department was familiar with the occasional petty crime, but this was unprecedented. With the sun barely edging up over the treetops, Detective Sarah Mitchell arrived at the scene, her expression unreadable beneath the weight of her badge and the burden of responsibility resting upon her shoulder. Detective Mitchell surveyed the crime scene with a sharp, discerning eye. She noted the torn fabric, the stretch of muck coating the trail, and the anxious faces of the search team as they awaited word about their friend. A chalk outline, though only an estimation, soon marked where they believed Emily had last been seen. It was a brutal reminder of the unbearable reality they now faced. Gathering the officers, Mitchell relayed the urgency of the investigation. They needed to canvass the area, interview possible witnesses, and unearth Emily's last movements. With each spoken word, the weight of the task ahead grew heavier. Whoever had taken Emily needed to be found before fear tightened its grip on all. Days turned into a blur of frantic interviews and unyielding questions. Friends and neighbors were brought in, each recounting trivialities about Emily's life that seemed to pale in comparison to the chilling reality of her absence. Every lead turned cold, every clue barely a whisper. As evenings blended into the threatening stillness of night, the tension in Alderwood grew thick. No one felt safe. What had once been a close-knit community, bound by tradition, began to fray at the seams, suspicion spiraling between neighbors. As Detective Mitchell pressed on, she could sense the urgency pulsing in her veins. Time was short, and with each passing day, hope for Emily's safe return dimmed, leaving an indelible shadow that seemed to taint the very essence of Alderwood. The dead ends. As days morphed into weeks, the initial fervor surrounding Emily's case began to slacken, replaced by an inescapable sense of foreboding. Detective Mitchell frantically sifted through the flimsy clues that littered the investigation, each one evaporating like morning mist. The conversations in town shifted from hope to despair, turning whispers into speculation that only widened the chasms between neighbors. Drained from sleepless nights and relentless pursuit, the detective huddled with her team in the dim light of the station. What once was a distraction had now turned into a constant reminder of their ephemeral findings. Reports of strangers seen around town were combed over, but none led to tangible breakthroughs. The limited surveillance footage from the local shops was just as inconclusive. Day by day, the town's pulse grew weaker, skirting around the ghost of Emily's vibrant spirit. The latest tip, a supposed sighting of a woman matching Emily's description near an abandoned cabin on the outskirts of town, fizzled with disarray. When Mitchell's team arrived, the creaking structure revealed nothing but peeling paint and the eerie silence of disuse. Dust droplets lingered in the air, settling like unresolved questions upon the floorboards, their inherent sadness echoing through empty corners. One lead after another slipped like sand through their fingers, creating a sense of hopelessness that clung to the officers like an unwelcome fog. The town had grown restless as the sun began to set earlier, casting long shadows across curbs and porches. Safety felt like a relic of the past. With every dead end, a collective sorrow deepened, and fear burgeoned in the hearts of Alderwood's residents. Detective Mitchell braced herself for what lay ahead. She felt the familiar coil of frustration creeping in as she stood at the precipice of uncertainty, staring into the abyss of lives disrupted and futures altered. The dark corners of the town began to reflect the shadows in her own mind out, lurking at every turn. A break in the case. After weeks entrenched in the lethargy of dead ends, a breakthrough in Emily's case arrived unexpectedly, ushered in on the wings of a tip. It was a nondescript Saturday morning when Detective Mitchell's phone buzzed with urgency. The caller, a local man named Mark, claimed he had witnessed a suspicious interaction between two individuals near the trail where Emily went missing. Mitchell listened intently as Mark described a fleeting encounter. Two figures, one noticeably taller than the other, engaged in hushed conversation while glancing furtively over their shoulders. The recollection of shadows within shadows piqued her interest, prompting an immediate follow-up. Mitchell arranged to meet Mark at the same overlook where he had been fishing the day of the sighting, a quiet spot that offered a panoramic view of the winding trails below. As she stepped onto the weathered wooden docks overlooking the glimmering lake, the chill of morning air served as a stark reminder of the urgency of their task. Mark arrived, his expression anxious yet resolute. He recounted every detail: the clothing they wore, the exchange of something small, and the palpable tension in the air. It was in this moment Mitchell felt the tight coil of hope unfurling. The details in hand, the investigative team moved into action. They scrutinized the witness descriptions against known images of residents and outsiders who frequented Alderwood, quickly isolating a potential suspect. Danny Rourke, a drifter with a tumultuous past. He had been seen in the area around the time of Emily's disappearance, and whispers of his erratic behavior soon surfaced. Mitchell's step quickened as they gathered intelligence on Rourke. A search of his last known whereabouts revealed a chilling connection. Friends mentioned him sketching or talking to a woman in town. Each thread wove together like the strands of a spider's web, leading towards a dark center that bore the weight of their collective fears. As the pieces fell into place, a sense of urgency burned in the pit of the detective's stomach. They were edging closer to the truth, though a heavy cloud of doubt lingered. Would Rourke be the key to unraveling the mystery, or merely a distraction from an even darker truth waiting to be uncovered? The suspect with the name Danny Rourke illuminated in their investigation. Detective Mitchell and her team began to piece together a profile of their suspect. Rourke was known to be transient, moving from town to town, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. He had arrived in Alderwood just weeks before Emily's disappearance, slipping into the town's fabric like a shadow at twilight. As Mitchell delved deeper, she uncovered a troubling history that included arrests for assault and theft. More disturbingly, local bars had seen him engage in altercations, fueled by alcohol and pent-up anger. Rourke was the kind of individual who thrived amid chaos. A man whose presence sent ripples of unease through anyone who crossed his path. And now he was at the center of their investigation. Armed with this new information, Mitchell called in her team for a meeting. We meticulously analyzed the reported sightings, Rourke's last known locations, and any potential connections to Emily. Each officer stationed at their desks, poring over files and notes, ignited a renewed energy within the room. This felt like the turning point they had been chasing for weeks. Investigators learned that Rourke had been seen lurking near the community center where Emily spent her days. This unsettling detail drew tight lines between the suspect and their victim, bridging the gap that had felt insurmountable until now. The team soon organized surveillance on Rourke, a tactic that would expose his movements and provide answers. As days passed, the uneasy tension lingered in the air like a creeping fog. The officers patrolling Alderwood worked with a sharpened awareness, understanding that they were racing against time. With Rourke in their sights, every moment became crucial. Then, late one evening, the hushed buzz of radios filled the living room of the station. Rourke had been sighted back near the trail where Emily had gone missing. Just like that, the team sprang into action, hearts racing with adrenaline as they prepared to confront the man whose dark past had now collided ominously with their present. Trial. The atmosphere in the small courthouse was heavy with anticipation as the trial of Danny Rourke began. Crowds filled the wooden benches, their faces a tapestry of sorrow, intertwined with strained hope. The specter of Emily Carter loomed large in the minds of those present. Her absence felt palpable, saturating the air with a tension that clung to the skin like a chill. Detective Mitchell sat in the front row, silently steeling herself as the proceedings commenced. The courtroom was a world of stark contrast, light pouring through tall windows, illuminating the stark faces of the jurors, and the shadowed corners where whispered conversations mingled with the weighty silence. The judge, a stoic figure presiding over the turmoil, tapped his gavel, establishing the decorum as the case unfolded before them. Prosecution painted Rourke as a man of volatile temperament, relying on witness testimonies to reconstruct his actions leading up to Emily's disappearance. They highlighted his history of violence and the unsettling testimonies from those who had seen him near the community center. Each account was another stitch in the fabric of guilt they wove. The courtroom listened intently as arguments were made, displaying their raw emotions like the brushstrokes of an artist seeking to evoke deep feeling. In contrast, the defense argued for Rourke's innocence, proclaiming that circumstantial evidence was insufficient to convict him. They painted him as a victim of circumstance, a drifter falsely accused, in a town desperate to heal its wounds. Count 3 accused. Rourke, seated beside his attorney, remained stoic, his eyes occasionally drifting to the gallery where Emily's family sat, their anguish evident in the tightness of their jaws. As witness after witness took the stand, the courtroom bore witness to the struggle of a community fighting for closure. The emotional weight escalated and families were left teetering at the precipice of despair. Finally, after days of testimony and cross-examinations, the case was handed over to the jury. The room hung in awaited anticipation, trembling with the possibilities of what the future would hold for Alder. Would they see justice for Emily Carter? Or would another shadow linger over the town, perpetuating the cycle of fear? Uncertainty. The aftermath. The verdict echoed through the courtroom like a thunderclap, shattering the stillness that had filled the room. When the jury returned with their decision guilty on all counts, an audible gasp rippled through the gallery. Relief mingled with grief, catharsis spiraling through those who sat in attendance. Detective Mitchell felt an overwhelming burden lift slightly from her shoulders. Yet the bestest luminous. Yet the bittersweet nature of justice loomed nearby. In the weeks that followed, Alderwood struggled to find its footing. Rourke's conviction sent waves through the community, yet shadows lingered, leaving unresolved questions hanging like fog over the townspeople. Emily's death, a specter that had haunted their days, became a rallying cry, a catalyst for change in the once sleepy town. Memorial services celebrated her life, recounting stories of laughter, art, and an indelible spirit that had touched so many. But amidst the healing, fissure formed within Alderwood. Trust had been fractured among neighbors, splitting bonds once solid and warm. People turned wary, unsure of whom to confide in, while the specter of fear still crept along the edges. The absence of Emily, her vibrant laugh and infectious enthusiasm remained a void that could never be filled. Meanwhile, Detective Mitchell found herself grappling with the emotional toll of the case. The trial had exposed the raw nerve of her community and forced a confrontation with her own fears and failed. As she drove through the familiar, leaf-strewn streets, she felt the weight of watchers' eyes upon her eyes that held both gratitude and unresolved pain. Alderwood began to rebuild, slowly but undeniably. Community events emerged as corners of normalcy. The annual Harvest Festival, once subdued by recent sorrow, took on new meaning as they rallied around hope and unity. The memory of Emily lived on, whispered among friends and celebrated through art and her story inspired a newfound vigilance among residents to protect their own. But in the private corners of her heart, Mitchell knew the scars ran deep, and recovery would take more than time. It would require a collective effort to shake off the lingering dread and rewrite their narrative. As life continued, a singular truth remained. Healing was possible, but the echoes of loss would forever ripple across Alderwood. Reflection. Months had slipped by since the verdict, and as winter descended upon Alderwood, Detective Mitchell found herself standing in a familiar clearing in the woods where Emily Carter had last been seen. The air was crisp, the sky a muted gray, and beneath her feet, the snow crunched with each deliberate step. Time had held the edges of pain, yet sorrow remained an unwelcome companion, lingering like the fog that had once enveloped the town. Mitchell reflected on the castle it had unraveled the threads of life for so many, entangled in the web of loss and search for justice. I did a or course of the quiet had returned in many respects, But it was a different kind of stillness. An echo of what normal had been before. She thought about Emily's laughter, the friendships that had blossomed, and the love that had surged through Alderwood in the wake of tragedy. It was the reminder of what was lost and a tribute to resilience. The challenge of healing stayed with her as well. In quiet moments, she pondered her role not just as a detective who had brought Rourke to justice, but as a vessel for the hopes of a grieving community. Alderwood had changed, irrevocably. Yet it had also transformed into a place where stories were shared and memories honored. Maybe in time, the wounds would start to heal, replacing the fear and unrest with a newfound appreciation for unity. As the first snow began to flutter down, she closed her eyes for a moment, letting it settle on her shoulders, immersing herself in reflection. Alderwood, though scarred, still had a heartbeat, a collective rhythm of humanity that throbbed through every corner of the town. Determined, she turned back toward home, knowing that while some echoes of loss would remain, the strength of those who survived would light the way forward.